Let me tell you about Marcus Rodriguez, also known as Tank to his friends, though honestly nobody called him that except himself. Marcus was what you might charitably describe as the human embodiment of Murphy's Law. If something could go wrong around him, it absolutely would. And if it couldn't go wrong, well, Marcus would find a way to make it possible. On Galactic Peace Station Omega-7, a gleaming monument to interspecies cooperation floating in the neutral zone, Marcus worked maintenance. Not because he was particularly good at it, mind you, but because apparently humans were considered too slow and clumsy for any job that actually mattered. The Galactic Council had decided that giving humans menial labor positions was an act of charity. How thoughtful of them. Marcus was elbow deep in an air recycler, wrestling with a particularly stubborn filter, when disaster struck. Which, let's be honest, was Tuesday for Marcus. He backed out of the maintenance panel just as Vexera, the station's Cytherian security chief, walked by carrying her precious archery equipment. Now, Cytherians looked like what would happen if you crossed a praying mantis with an Olympic athlete, and gave the result anger management issues. They were tall, chitinous, and absolutely convinced they were the galaxy's gift to everything involving precision and speed. Vexera embodied all of these qualities, plus she had the charming personality of a caffeinated wasp. Marcus, in his infinite coordination, managed to bump directly into her equipment case. The thing went flying, precision instruments scattering across the corridor, like very expensive confetti. A quantum-calibrated targeting scope made a particularly satisfying crash as it hit the wall. "You bumbling fool." Vexera's voice had that lovely quality that suggested she was considering which of Marcus's limbs to remove first. "Do you have any idea how long it takes to calibrate those instruments?" Sorry," Marcus offered, which was about as helpful as bringing a water gun to a space battle. "I can help you pick them up?" The sound Vexera made could have curdled milk across 3-star systems. "Help? You? The clumsiest member of the slowest species in the known galaxy." She began gathering her equipment with quick, precise movements that made Marcus feel like he was moving through molasses. "Humans, how your species ever made it off your death world is beyond me." That's when Commander Bloop appeared, probably drawn by the sound of Vexera's impending homicide. Bloop was a Gellan, which meant he looked like someone had taught a pile of purple jello how to wear a uniform. He was also the station commander, which meant he got paid to deal with this kind of nonsense daily. Now, Bloop said in that diplomatic way that suggested he'd rather be literally anywhere else. "I'm sure this was just an accident." "An accident?" Vexera's compound eyes glittered with malice. "Commander, this human just destroyed equipment worth more than his planet's entire GDP. Equipment that I need for the Galactic Precision Championships next cycle." Marcus winced. The Galactic Precision Championships were a big deal, apparently. Every species sent their best to compete in various accuracy-based competitions. The Cytherians had won the archery division for the last 47 years running. "Perhaps," Vexera continued, her voice dripping with what Marcus assumed was sarcasm but might have been actual venom. "The human would like to demonstrate why his species deserves to share space with their betters." "I really should get back to the air recyclers," Marcus said, recognizing the tone of someone about to make his day significantly worse. "Oh, but I insist." Vexera's smile revealed far too many sharp teeth. "After all, you've disrupted my training. The least you can do is provide some entertainment. A simple test of reflexes. You, attempting to dodge my arrows." By now, other station personnel had gathered to watch the show. There was Glip, a mantoid whose species evolved from herbivores and spent most of their time being anxious about everything. There was Captain Zertok, a Draknari, who looked like someone had crossed a dragon with a very grumpy accountant. Even some of the civilian traders had stopped to gawk. "This should be amusing," Captain Zertok rumbled. "I have never seen a human move faster than continental drift." "Come now," Commander Bloop said weakly, "surely we can resolve this diplomatically." "Oh no," Vexera said, pulling out her bow, "this will be very diplomatic. The human can demonstrate his species' legendary reflexes, and I can demonstrate why Cytherians are the apex of evolutionary development. Everyone wins." Marcus looked around at the gathering crowd, all of whom seemed to think watching a human get turned into a pincushion was prime entertainment. He sighed, recognizing the look of aliens who had already decided this was going to be hilarious. "Fine," he said. "But if I'm going to be target practice, can we at least make it interesting?" Vexera's laugh sounded like someone had fed a buzzsaw a diet of pure contempt. "Interesting? Oh, this will be fascinating. Let me explain something to you, human." She hefted her bow, a sleek weapon that looked like it had been forged by engineers who thought regular physics were merely suggestions. "Cytherian war arrows travel at 200 meters per second. We use them to hunt skitterwings on our homeworld." "Should I know what those are?" Marcus asked. "Creatures that move so fast your human eyes can't even track them," Vexera replied with obvious relish. They're considered impossible prey by every other species. For Cytherians, they're target practice. She moved to the station's small recreational area, where a practice dummy had been set up for various training exercises. The thing looked sturdy enough to stop a small meteor. Vexera nocked an arrow, drew back the string, and released in one fluid motion that was admittedly impressive. The arrow didn't just hit the dummy. It went through the dummy, through the reinforced wall behind it, and presumably continued its journey until it hit something in the next sector. The dummy's head simply ceased to exist. Wonderful, Marcus muttered. And I'm supposed to dodge these things. The crowd was growing by the minute. Word had apparently spread through the station's gossip network, which operated faster than most warp drives. Aliens were placing bets with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for natural disasters or reality television. Glip the mantoid was nervously clicking his mandibles. The odds are currently 4,000 to 1 against the human surviving this with all his original limbs. I'll take those odds, announced Trader Voss, a Centaurian whose species had never met a gambling opportunity they couldn't exploit. Put me down for 50 credits on the human losing at least 3 appendages. You're all heart, Marcus said dryly. Captain Zertok rumbled with what might have been laughter. I have studied human physiology. Your reaction time is approximately 0.2 seconds. Cytherian arrows travel the length of this corridor in 0.1 seconds. The mathematics are not in your favor. Thanks for the pep talk, Marcus replied. Really feeling the team spirit here. Vexera was clearly enjoying herself. Tell you what, human, since I'm feeling generous, I'll make this fair. I'll only use 12 arrows, and I'll give you 30 seconds to dodge them all. The crowd murmured appreciatively. This was apparently considered wildly generous, like offering to only break half of someone's bones. 30 whole seconds. Marcus scratched his head. Wow, that's almost enough time to write my will. Don't worry, Vexera said with mock sympathy. I'll aim for non-vital areas, mostly. How reassuring. Marcus looked around at the assembled aliens, all of whom seemed to think they were about to witness either the galaxy's shortest archery demonstration or its most expensive cleanup job. Actually, I have one request. Oh, this should be rich, Vexera said. What could you possibly want that would help you survive this? Marcus grinned, and for just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes that might have been dangerous if anyone had been paying attention. Can I close my eyes? The corridor erupted in laughter. Glip clicked so hard he nearly fell over. Captain Zertok's rumbling became a full-blown roar of amusement. Even Commander Bloop's gelatinous form jiggled with mirth. Close your eyes. Vexera could barely speak through her laughter. The human wants to make this harder for himself. Oh, this is perfect. Yes, by all means. Close your eyes. I wouldn't want you to see your doom coming. The human has clearly suffered a psychological break, Captain Zertok observed. Perhaps we should call medical. No, Trader Voss said, furiously recalculating his bets. This is even better. I'm changing my wager to human doesn't last 5 seconds. Marcus stood in the center of the corridor, looking for all the world like a man who had accepted his fate. The aliens formed a rough circle around him, chattering excitedly about the entertainment about to unfold. Any last words? Vexera asked, drawing her first arrow. Marcus closed his eyes and smiled. Yeah, duck. What happened next would be talked about in alien bars for decades. Marcus Rodriguez, the clumsy human maintenance worker who couldn't walk through a corridor without breaking something, suddenly became very still. Not the kind of stillness that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from absolute focus. Vexera drew back her first arrow, aimed for Marcus's shoulder, and released. Marcus moved exactly 3 inches to the left. The arrow whistled past him, missing by what couldn't have been more than a hair's width. The crowd went quiet. That wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were slow. Everyone knew humans were slow. Lucky guess, Vexera muttered. But there was something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Uncertainty. The second arrow came faster, aimed lower. Marcus shifted his weight, a movement so subtle it barely registered, and the arrow buried itself in the wall where his leg had been a fraction of a second earlier. Okay, Trader Voss said nervously. That's 2 lucky guesses. But Marcus wasn't guessing. Eyes still closed, he had entered something that looked almost like a meditative state. His breathing was slow and steady, his posture relaxed. He looked like a man taking a pleasant nap, if you ignored the fact that lethal projectiles were flying at him. The third arrow came from a different angle. Vexera had moved, trying to throw off his timing. Marcus ducked, a smooth motion that flowed like water, and the arrow passed harmlessly over his head. This is impossible, Captain Zertok rumbled, but his voice had lost its earlier amusement. The fourth arrow should have been the end of it. Vexara fired it with perfect Cytherian precision, accounting for every possible evasion pattern she could imagine. Marcus simply wasn't there when it arrived. He had twisted his body in a way that seemed to defy several laws of physics, the arrow passing through the space where his torso had been a heartbeat before. The corridor was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop, assuming the pin was falling through vacuum. "He's reading her," whispered Glip, his compound eyes wide with shock. Somehow, he's reading her movements. But it was more than that. Marcus wasn't just reacting to Vexara's shots, he was predicting them. Each dodge came before the arrow was even fully drawn, as if he knew exactly where it would go before she did. See, here's what none of the aliens understood about humans. They looked at Earth and saw a death world, which it absolutely was. They saw a species that was slow, weak and fragile compared to the galaxy's apex predators. What they didn't see was how humans had survived on that death world for millions of years. Humans weren't the fastest runners. They weren't the strongest fighters. They weren't the most armored, or the most venomous or the most anything. Really. What humans had developed was something far more dangerous. Pattern recognition on a level that bordered on prescience. Every human alive was descended from ancestors who had survived by reading the signs. The way grass moved before a predator struck. The sound of air displacement that meant incoming death, the micro-expressions that revealed an enemy's intentions before they even knew they had them. Marcus had grown up in Detroit, where reading the street was a survival skill. He'd learned to spot trouble 3 blocks away, to know which footsteps meant danger, to feel the weight of hostile attention before it turned violent. Those skills had translated surprisingly well to maintenance work, where knowing when machinery was about to fail could mean the difference between a quick repair and a catastrophic explosion. But right now, Marcus wasn't thinking about any of that. He was simply moving, his body responding to information his conscious mind wasn't even processing. The tension in Vexara's muscles, the subtle shift in her stance, the way her breathing changed as she adjusted her aim. Arrow 5 came in low and fast. Marcus stepped over it without breaking stride, like he was avoiding a puddle on the sidewalk. Arrow 6 came from behind, after Vexara had repositioned herself. Marcus spun, the motion so fluid it looked choreographed, and the arrow passed through empty air. By the time the 7th arrow was knocked, the crowd of aliens had backed away from the corridor. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else entirely. "What is he?" Glip whispered. Commander Bloop's gelatinous form had gone very still. "I don't know. But I'm beginning to think we've made a terrible mistake." Vexara was no longer confident. Her shots were coming faster now, driven by frustration and growing fear. 8, 9, 10 arrows. Each one placed with deadly precision, each one missing Marcus by margins that shouldn't have been possible. Marcus moved through the barrage like he was dancing to music only he could hear. Every motion was economical, precise, beautiful in its efficiency. He never moved more than necessary, never wasted energy on dramatic evasions. He was a master class in doing exactly what needed to be done and nothing more. The 11th arrow came so fast it was barely visible. Marcus tilted his head, and it passed close enough to ruffle his hair. That's when he opened his eyes. "One more to go," he said pleasantly, like he was commenting on the weather. Vexara stared at Marcus like he'd just announced he was actually 3 smaller humans in a trench coat. Her compound eyes, designed to track the fastest prey on her homeworld, couldn't quite process what they'd just witnessed. 11 arrows. 11 perfect shots that should have turned the maintenance worker into a very artistic wall decoration. All misses. "This is impossible," she hissed, her voice cracking with something that might have been panic. "No species has reflexes that fast. No species." Marcus opened his eyes fully and looked directly at her. For the first time since this whole mess started, he didn't look clumsy or confused or apologetic. He looked dangerous. Not in the way a Draknari looked dangerous, with claws and fangs and enough firepower to level a city block. Marcus looked dangerous the way a black hole looked dangerous, quiet and unassuming right up until you realized you were already past the event horizon. "You're right," he said conversationally. "This isn't about reflexes." Vexara's hands were shaking as she knocked her final arrow. This was her masterpiece shaft, crafted from crystallized quantum flux and fletched with feathers from a bird that only existed on Tuesdays. It was worth more than most starships and had never missed a target in 17 years of competition. "I don't care what trick you're using," she snarled. "This arrow adjusts its trajectory mid-flight. It homes in on biosignatures. It's physically impossible to dodge. Sounds expensive, Marcus observed. She drew back the string and this time everyone in the corridor could feel the difference. The arrow hummed with contained energy, its tip glowing with targeting matrices that painted Marcus in 17 different spectrums of light. Quantum computers built into the shaft calculated trajectory, wind resistance, target movement, and about 6,000 other variables. "Goodbye, human," Vexara whispered, and released. The arrow moved faster than anything they'd seen yet. It didn't just fly toward Marcus, it bent space around itself, taking a path that existed in dimensions most species couldn't even perceive. It curved, adjusted, compensated for every possible evasive maneuver. Marcus didn't dodge. Instead, he reached out with his left hand and caught the arrow 6 inches from his face. The silence that followed was so complete it had its own gravity well. "Thanks," Marcus said, examining the arrow with professional interest. "Nice craftsmanship, very symmetrical." He held it out to Vexara, who was staring at him like he'd just juggled her ancestral spirits. "Here, you probably want this back." Vexara didn't take the arrow. She couldn't. Her entire worldview had just been fed through a blender and served as a smoothie of existential crisis. "How?" The word came out as barely a whisper. Marcus shrugged, still holding the arrow. "You want the technical explanation or the simple one?" "Both," Commander Bloop said quickly. His gelatinous form had gone completely transparent, which was apparently what happened when Gellens experienced severe shock. "Simple version first," Marcus said, finally setting the arrow down on a nearby maintenance cart. "You all think humans are slow because you're measuring the wrong thing. You're looking at our reaction time after we see a threat. But we don't wait to see threats. We predict them." He walked over to where Vexara stood frozen, moving with that same casual confidence he'd shown while dodging her arrows. "Every human alive is descended from millions of years of ancestors who survived by reading patterns. Not just seeing them, reading them, understanding them, predicting them." "That's impossible," Captain Zertok rumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Marcus turned to face the crowd. "Your species, Captain, evolved on a world with 3 suns and no seasons. Predictable environment, reliable food sources, clear hierarchy of predators. You got big and strong because you could afford to." He pointed at Glip. "Mantoids evolved from herbivores on a garden world. Your biggest threat was occasionally running out of the good leaves. You developed anxiety as a survival trait, because you literally had nothing more dangerous to worry about." His gaze settled on Vexara. "Catherians evolved as apex predators on a world where you were the scariest thing around. You got fast and precise because nothing could challenge you." Marcus spread his arms. "Humans evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us every single day. We weren't fast enough to run from everything. We weren't strong enough to fight everything. We weren't tough enough to tank hits from everything. So we learned to see everything coming." "That doesn't explain catching an arrow that adjusts its trajectory," Vexara said weakly. Marcus grinned, and there was something predatory in the expression. "Technical explanation time. That arrow doesn't just adjust its trajectory, it calculates based on biosignatures." "Right. Heart rate, muscle tension, neural activity." Vexara nodded mutely. "Here's the thing about humans," Marcus continued. "We're persistence hunters. You know what that means. It means we can control our biosignatures. We can regulate our heart rate, control our muscle tension, even influence our neural activity. Your arrow was aiming at where I was going to be based on what my body was telling it. I just told it something else." The crowd was silent, processing this information. "But more than that," Marcus said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "Humans learned to hunt by exhaustion. We'd pick a target and just follow it. For days, for weeks if necessary. Not because we were faster, but because we could read exactly what it was going to do next. Where it would run, where it would hide, when it would get tired." He looked directly at Vexara. "Your species hunts by ambush and precision. One shot, one kill. You never learned to think more than one move ahead, because you never needed to. Humans, we've been thinking 12 moves ahead since before we invented fire. While you were lining up that first shot," Marcus continued, "I was already reading your stance, your breathing pattern, your grip tension. By the 3rd arrow, I knew exactly how you hold your bow when you're frustrated. By the 6th I could predict your repositioning strategy. By the 9th I was reading micro-expressions you didn't even know you were making." He picked up Vexara's expensive arrow again, turning it over in his hands. "And this final shot? The quantum-guided biosignature tracking, never miss masterpiece. I spent the last 30 seconds teaching my body to lie to its sensors. Heart rate steady, muscle tension minimal, Neural activity calm. As far as your arrow could tell, I was taking a nap. Then why did you close your eyes? Commander Bloop asked. Marcus laughed, a sound with entirely too much humor in it. Because visual input was just distracting me from the important stuff. I could hear your heartbeat, smell your stress pheromones, feel the vibrations in the floor from your stance shifts. Eyes just got in the way. He handed the arrow back to Vexara, who took it with nerveless fingers. Thanks for the workout though. It's been a while since I had to really pay attention to anything. The silence stretched on for what felt like several geological epochs. Finally, Vexara found her voice, though it came out sounding like she'd been gargling gravel mixed with existential dread. You're telling me, she said slowly, that you've been hiding these abilities this entire time. That every human on this station is capable of this? Marcus scratched his head, managing to look embarrassed, despite having just performed what amounted to a physics-defying magic trick. Hiding? Who said anything about hiding? You never asked if I could dodge arrows. You asked if I could fix your air recycler. Completely different skill sets. Different skill sets. Captain Zertok's voice climbed several octaves, which was impressive for a species that normally communicated in bass notes that could crack foundation stones. You just caught a quantum-guided projectile with your bare hands. And I also fixed your air recycler yesterday, Marcus replied reasonably. Both required paying attention to patterns, just different kinds of patterns. Airflow dynamics versus projectile trajectories. Similar principles, really. Commander Bloop had managed to regain some of his color, though he was still translucent enough that you could see his internal organs doing what Gellan organs did when stressed, which was apparently a lot of very concerning pulsing. Marcus, I need you to be very clear about something. When you knocked over Vexara's equipment earlier, was that actually an accident? Marcus looked genuinely thoughtful for a moment. Define accident. Did you intend to knock it over? Bloop pressed. Not specifically, no, but I did notice that the quantum calibration matrix was building up a dangerous resonance frequency that would have overloaded in about 6 minutes. The targeting array was showing early signs of cascade failure, and the power coupling was definitely going to short-circuit and probably electrocute anyone standing within 3 meters. Marcus paused. So when I bumped into it, I might have bumped a little harder than strictly necessary. Vexara stared at her equipment, then at Marcus, then back at her equipment. You're saying that pile of broken instruments was about to kill me? Probably just maim you, Marcus said helpfully. Cytherians have pretty good electrical resistance, though you might have lost a few limbs. How could you possibly know that just from walking by? Marcus shrugged. The harmonic vibration was wrong. The smell of ozone from the overheating circuits. The way the lights dimmed slightly every time the system cycled. Plus that little spark you probably didn't notice coming from the power coupling every 47 seconds. He counted off on his fingers. Oh, and the quantum flux readings were showing a progressive instability pattern that I've seen before in 14 other pieces of equipment on this station. 14 other pieces of equipment, Commander Bloop repeated faintly. 15 if you count the coffee machine in Section C, but I figured that one was supposed to make those noises. The aliens looked at each other with dawning horror. Trader Voss, who had been unusually quiet since losing several significant bets, cleared his throat. Marcus, last week when you spilled that Centaurian acid wine all over my cargo manifest. The one that dissolved the datapad. Marcus nodded. Yeah, that manifest had been tampered with. Someone had altered the cargo weights and destination codes. If you'd tried to ship that load, the gravitational imbalances would have torn your ship apart during the jump to hyperspace. And the week before that, when you tripped and knocked me away from the navigation console, Captain Zertok asked, his voice getting smaller with each word. Solar flare was about to hit. The console was about to feed back enough energy to cook you from the inside out. I figured getting knocked over was preferable to spontaneous combustion. Glip's mandibles were clicking so rapidly, they sounded like maracas in a hurricane. The time you accidentally turned off the environmental controls in my quarters. Gas leak. Invisible, odorless, but definitely toxic to mantoids. Turning off the air circulation stopped it from spreading to lethal concentrations. Marcus looked apologetic. I did try to hint about it, but you seemed pretty focused on complaining about the temperature change. This is insane, Vexara said, though she'd stopped sounding angry and started sounding something closer to terrified. You're telling me that every clumsy accident you've had has actually been you preventing disasters. Not every accident, Marcus protested. Sometimes I actually am just clumsy, like that time I walked into the door in Section F. That was just me not paying attention. The door that had been sabotaged by those Regellian smugglers, Commander Bloop asked weakly. The one that would have crushed the next person to use it. Marcus paused. Okay, bad example. But I really wasn't paying attention to the door. I was tracking the scent markers the Regellians had left behind to identify their sabotage points. The implications were starting to sink in for everyone present. Trader Voss looked like he was about to be sick. How many of us should be dead right now? On this station, this week, Marcus did some quick mental calculations. Probably 15 or 20 of you. It's been a busy week. There was the reactor coolant leak that would have irradiated half of Deck 7, the structural fatigue in the docking bay that would have caused explosive decompression, that batch of Arcturian food supplements that had been contaminated with something that would have put most carbon-based lifeforms into toxic shock. He trailed off. Should I keep going? No, Commander Bloop said quickly. No, I think we get the picture. Captain Zertok was staring at Marcus, like he'd just revealed he was actually a deity in maintenance coveralls. You prevented all of these disasters by appearing to be clumsy. It's not appearing to be clumsy. Marcus corrected. I am clumsy. It's just that my clumsiness tends to be conveniently timed. Hard to explain the difference to someone who hasn't spent their whole life expecting everything to go wrong. But why not just tell us about these problems directly? Vexara demanded. Marcus gave her a look that suggested she'd just asked why water was wet. Have you met you? Any of you? Glip has a panic attack when the food synthesizer makes an unusual noise. Captain Zertok considers it a personal insult when someone suggests his ship might have a technical problem. Commander Bloop spends most of his time trying to prevent diplomatic incidents, and Trader Voss would sell his own mother for spare parts if the profit margin was good enough. I would not. Voss protested. You tried to sell me a genuine Terran artifacts last month that was obviously a 21st century bottle opener. Marcus pointed out. That's completely different. Is it though? Marcus turned back to the group. Look, if I walked up to any of you and said, hey, your expensive equipment is about to explode, what would your first reaction be? The aliens looked at each other. The answer was written on their faces. You'd assume I was trying to scam you, sabotage you, or cover up something I'd broken. Marcus continued. But if I accidentally bump into the dangerous thing and break it in a way that prevents the disaster, everyone just thinks clumsy human. What do you expect? And moves on with their day. That's Commander Bloop started, then stopped. That's actually a very sophisticated approach to crisis management. It's what we call plausible deniability. Marcus said. Humans invented the concept about 5 minutes after we figured out how to lie. Very useful for keeping the peace while still keeping people alive. Vexara was examining her broken equipment with new eyes. So when you offer to help me fix this, I'll actually fix it. Marcus said. And I'll make sure it doesn't try to kill you again. Consider it an apology for ruining your target practice. I don't understand. Glip said, his anxiety levels apparently hitting new personal records. If humans are this capable, why do you let us think you're inferior? Why not demand better positions, better treatment? Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the question. Who says we want better positions? I like fixing things. I'm good at fixing things. And somebody needs to keep all of you from accidentally killing yourselves with your own technology. He grinned. Besides, have you seen the paperwork that comes with command positions? I'd rather dodge arrows.
3 days later, Marcus was back to his usual routine, which involved crawling through maintenance shafts and muttering creative profanity at stubborn machinery. The only difference was that now he had an audience. Are you sure that's supposed to make that noise? Glip asked nervously, hovering outside the access panel where Marcus was working on the primary life support systems. Which noise? Marcus's voice was muffled by the machinery. The rhythmic clanking, the occasional spark shower, or the sound like someone strangling a mechanical cat. All of them. The clanking is normal, the sparks are mostly harmless, and the cat strangling sound means I'm doing my job right. There was a particularly loud bang, followed by Marcus saying something in what was probably Spanish but definitely wasn't suitable for translation. There we go. Crisis averted. What crisis? Glip's mandibles were already clicking with preemptive anxiety. Marcus emerged from the access panel, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better decades. Oh, nothing major, just a cascade failure building up in the oxygen recycling matrix that would have suffocated everyone on the station in about 6 hours. Glip made a sound like a tea kettle, having an existential crisis. 6 hours, give or take.
Hard to be precise with these older systems. Marcus sealed the access panel and made a note on his work tablet. Though I suppose if anyone had bothered to check the atmospheric readings in the past week, someone might have noticed the gradual decrease in breathable air. But the atmospheric monitors show everything is normal. Yeah, they would. Someone's been hacking them to hide the problem. Marcus showed Glip his tablet, which displayed readings that looked considerably less reassuring than the official station reports. Probably whoever's been sabotaging equipment around here. They're getting more sophisticated. Sabotaging. Glip's voice climbed another octave. Someone's deliberately trying to kill us. Well, not you specifically. I think they're after the station's trade agreements. Kill everyone, blame it on system failures, swoop in and buy the salvage rights cheap. Marcus shrugged. Pretty standard corporate espionage stuff, really. Standard? Glip was approaching frequencies that only dolphins could hear. Before Marcus could explain why attempted mass murder was considered routine business practice in certain sectors, Vexera appeared around the corner. She'd been doing that a lot lately, showing up wherever Marcus was working with an expression that suggested she was still processing recent revelations about the nature of reality. Marcus, she said without preamble. I've been thinking about your offer to join station security. I already told you I'm not interested. Marcus replied, gathering his tools. I like my current job. But you could be so much more effective in an official capacity. With proper authority, you could address these threats directly, instead of relying on strategic accidents. Marcus paused in his tool collecting, and gave her a look that was equal parts amused and pitying. Vexera, let me ask you something. How many criminal organizations currently operate on this station? None, she said immediately. I run a tight security operation. Okay, how many criminal organizations do you think operate on this station? Vexera's confidence faltered slightly. What do you mean? I mean, in the past 3 days, I've identified 17 different smuggling operations. 4 separate espionage rings, at least 6 competing sabotage efforts, and what appears to be an illegal fight club running out of Cargo Bay 7. Marcus resumed packing his tools. Oh, and someone's been running a black market organ harvesting operation through the medical bay. But I think that one's actually sanctioned by the Galactic Health Authority, so it might not count. That's impossible, Vexera said weakly. I would have detected, would you? When's the last time you walked through the maintenance tunnels? Checked the waste processing systems? Actually looked at what goes on in the parts of the station that aren't on the official tour routes? Vexera opened her mouth, then closed it. See, this is what I'm talking about. Marcus continued. You're thinking like a security chief. Official channels, proper procedures, documented evidence. Very thorough, very professional, very visible. Also very predictable. He hefted his toolkit and started walking toward his next assignment. I'm thinking like a maintenance worker. I go everywhere, I see everything, and nobody pays attention to me because I'm just the guy who fixes the toilets. Which, by the way, is how I discovered the organ harvesting thing. Amazing what people flush when they think nobody's watching. But if you have this information, why not share it with security? Vexera asked, following him down the corridor. I did, 3 months ago, filed a report about unusual activities in 17 different locations. Want to guess what happened to that report? It was investigated thoroughly, and it was classified as low priority, and buried in bureaucratic procedure until the heat death of the universe. Marcus interrupted. Because it came from a human maintenance worker, and obviously we don't know anything about anything. They'd reached the next maintenance station, where Marcus began setting up for what appeared to be routine work on the station's communication array. Glip and Vexera watched nervously, as he opened several access panels, and began poking around inside with instruments that sparked occasionally. So instead, Marcus continued. His voice slightly muffled as he worked. I handle things my way. The organ harvesting operation had a tragic equipment malfunction last week. All their refrigeration units mysteriously failed, spoiling their entire inventory. Very sad. Cost them millions. That was you? Vexera asked. Me? I was just doing routine maintenance on the power distribution grid. If someone happened to route their illegal medical equipment through an unstable power coupling, well, that's just poor planning on their part. There was a particularly impressive shower of sparks, followed by what sounded like a small explosion somewhere deep in the station's infrastructure. What was that? Glip squeaked. That, Marcus said with satisfaction, was the sound of the illegal surveillance network that's been monitoring everyone's private communications suffering a catastrophic system failure. Someone was spying on us. Oh yeah,
Very sophisticated operation. Quantum encrypted data mining, AI-assisted pattern analysis, the works. They were probably planning to sell the information to the highest bidder. Marcus sealed one access panel and moved to another. Fortunately, they made the rookie mistake of hiding their equipment in the same conduits as the main communication array. And you just happen to be working on the communication array today. I've been working on the communication array every day for the past month, Marcus said. Amazing how many routine maintenance issues it's been having lately. Almost like someone was using it for purposes it wasn't designed for. Vexera was quiet for a long moment. Marcus, exactly how much of what happens on this station do you control? Marcus paused in his work, considering the question seriously. Control is a strong word. I prefer to think of it as gentle guidance toward outcomes that don't involve everyone dying horribly. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you, Marcus replied. Because if I told you the real scope of what I do here, you'd either try to stop me, or try to make me do it officially. The first option gets people killed, and the second option buries everything in so much red tape that nothing gets done until after the disasters happen. He emerged from the access panel, tools in hand. Look, Vexera, I know this is hard for you to accept. Your entire species is built around the idea of direct action, decisive strikes, overwhelming force. But sometimes the best way to win a fight is to make sure it never happens in the first place. By pretending to be clumsy. By being exactly what people expect me to be. Marcus corrected. A human maintenance worker who's a little too accident-prone for his own good. Nobody suspects the janitor, nobody questions the repair guy, and nobody pays attention to the person fixing their toilets. It's the perfect cover for actually keeping things running. Captain Zertok's voice boomed through the corridor as he approached. Marcus, I need to speak with you about my ship's navigation system. Let me guess, Marcus said without looking up. It's been making unusual noises. The star charts keep showing minor inconsistencies, and you've been having trouble with the autopilot. How did you? Zertok stopped. Never mind. Yes, all of those things. Someone's been installing illegal tracking devices and visiting ships, Marcus explained. They're interfering with your navigation systems and feeding your location data to pirates. I can fix it, but you're going to have to trust me to do it my way. Which involves making it look like I accidentally broke something expensive while I'm actually removing the tracking devices and tracing them back to their source. Marcus packed up his tools again. Standard procedure, really. And if I said I wanted to handle this through official channels, Marcus shrugged. Then you'd spend the next 6 months filing reports and requesting investigations while pirates continue to track your every move. Your choice. Captain Zertok was quiet for a moment. Will it look convincing? Captain, I once made it look like I accidentally destroyed a quantum computer while I was actually using it to hack into a criminal network and download their entire operation database. Marcus grinned. Trust me, I'm very good at looking incompetent. This is insane, Vexera muttered. You're running a one-person intelligence operation, disguised as maintenance work. I prefer to think of it as very thorough customer service, Marcus replied. Speaking of which, I should probably get back to work. That reactor in Section E isn't going to fix itself, and if I don't get to it in the next hour, the automatic safety systems are going to shut down and leave half the station without power. Another sabotage? Glip asked, resigned. Nah, just regular old entropy. Sometimes things actually do break down naturally. Marcus started walking towards Section E. Though now that I think about it, someone did try to hack the reactor's safety protocols yesterday. I should probably check on that too. As he walked away, they could hear him muttering to himself about resonance frequencies and cascade failures, and someone's mother who apparently had questionable taste in offspring. You know, Vexera said thoughtfully. I'm starting to think we've been asking the wrong question this whole time. What do you mean? Glip asked. We've been wondering why humans let us think they're inferior, she said. But maybe the real question is, what happens to a galaxy that depends on a species they don't even realize they're depending on? Before anyone could answer, there was another explosion from somewhere deep in the station, followed by Marcus's voice echoing through the ventilation system. Don't worry, that was supposed to happen. Mostly. Commander Bloop's voice came over the intercom moments later. All station personnel, please ignore the large explosion in Section E. Maintenance assures us this is part of normal operations. Normal operations, Vexera repeated. Normal operations. Glip agreed. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear Marcus whistling while he worked, completely unbothered by the fact that he just casually prevented what was probably another catastrophic disaster while making it look like routine maintenance. And for the first time since meeting humans, the aliens on Station Omega-7 began to suspect that maybe, just maybe, they'd been getting the whole arrangement backwards from the very beginning. After all, when you really thought about it, who was actually working for whom?